If you did well in school, but now you're stuck in business, this video explains exactly why. And it is not what you think. It is not your strategy. It is not your offer. It is not your market. And it is certainly not your IQ or your work ethic. It is your brain. The smarter you are, the more likely you are to be trapped and stuck right now. And I'm going to show you the neuroscience behind why that is and what to do about it. I've worked one-on-one with about 410 founders. And the pattern I see most often is that they're typically the smartest person in their business and in any room. And that's the problem. Because they can predict 47 outcomes for their next launch, so they delay it. They can see exactly why outreach might land wrong, so they don't send it. And they understand how stacked the odds are against them, so they stay frozen. And they're not lazy, they're not undisciplined. Their brain is literally working against them. When you're very smart, at the brain level, your prefrontal cortex is overactive. The planning and prediction center that you spent years training in simulating outcomes before taking action. And school rewarded this. Think before you speak, optimize before you submit, predict before you act. That's how your brain works. You build your brain to prioritize being right before actually doing the thing. Every decision in business triggers this simulation. If you need to send outreach, your brain predicts rejection and embarrassment. If you need to raise your prices, the brain calculates the customers that you may lose. And this simulation feel real, feel like wisdom, but they're not. It's just your brain manufacturing scenarios trying to protect you from pain because your brain has been trained to be smart about it. And if you've been burned before, a failed launch, a bad hire, a legal problem, a public embarrassment of any kind, that prediction machine goes in overdrive. Every action you take is filtered through this filter. Will this hurt me? And the smarter you are, the more convincing those simulations actually become. And the more convincing they are, guess what? The less you sheep. And I remember I worked with a founder in the financial education space. Crazy smart. High six figures for 3 years straight. And then his former partners sued him 3 times. Those lawsuits literally rewired his brain in the wrong direction because he was curled in the floor. That's his own words. He understood exactly what he needed to do to keep running his business and deal with lawsuit. He had the tactics nailed, but he was scared and afraid. He couldn't execute them. The first thing I did when we started working together is make him track his time. The data showed that he spent about 10 minutes per week on high leverage activities. The rest was support tickets, slide tweaks, research that went nowhere, low risk, low pain stuff the brain was manufacturing to avoid the pain of actually doing the things he knew he needed to do to scale. His own perception has been rewired due to the lawsuits. And that's the intelligence trap. He could manufacture a zillion scenarios that he needed to address instead of actually doing what mattered. So before we touch strategy, we touch his nervous system. We literally rewired it. We taught his amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, that discomfort was not dangerous. We did it through ice baths, we did it through heat therapy, we did it through controlled exposure to outreach. We used a whole methodology to retrain his brain. And I remember about a month into our work, his merchant account shut down on a random Monday. And he said that previously that would have had him paralyzed for 3 days. But this time, and we're only 1 month into it, he told me it was like 5 minutes of frustration. Then, okay, what do we do? He got on a call with a couple guys, and the 2 accounts raised his limits by the end of the day. 6 months later, he was in pacing for the best year ever. And it was not because he suddenly learned more about the business he was in. No, because we trained the brain to actually execute. And he was able to let go of the fear and frustration that the lawsuit had created. There's something in business that less smart founders know that smart founders don't, which is the fact that business is not a puzzle. Business and life really is a game. And puzzles reward the person who thinks the longest. Games rewards the person who moves the fastest. So a less smart founder acts and gets feedback, any feedback, using what the scientists call reward prediction error, the gap between what you expect to happen and what actually happens. And that gap, that error, is how the brain actually learns. Not by thinking about what happened, but instead by actually measuring what did. And smart founders avoid that error because they feel that's a personal failure. Less smart founders seek it constantly because they understand that's the only thing they have to actually get better. So they maximize their learning by acting more frequently. Optimizes for avoiding bad feelings, the smart guys. But the dumb guys that are actually smarter in the long term, they optimize for getting information, and that's how they win. Execution creates momentum. Momentum creates proof, and proof creates confidence. And that's how they eventually outperform you. They're not smarter than you, they just have failed 10 more times that you have even tried. So if you're stuck, if your revenue has plateaued, if you're busy but not growing, if you know what to do but you're not doing it, that's not a strategy problem. That is a brain capacity problem. You can't think your way out of it. You have to rewire yourself. And here's the sequence, because the sequence actually matters. If you skip a step, it doesn't work. First, you have to accept that you can't do it yourself. See, you are too smart to do this on your own, because your brain will rationalize why this is okay. You will generate sophisticated reasons why your situation is unique and doesn't need to change. You eventually figure it out. No. You won't figure it out. You need an external system, whatever that system is. It can be an accountability system, it can be a tool, it can be a program like ours, it doesn't matter. But you need someone to get you out of that trap. Step number 2 is to track everything. Your time, your activities, your outputs, your emotional baseline, everything. Because only data is what cannot be argued with. Remember my client who was spending like 10 minutes a day on high leverage activities? That number needs to be in front of you. And then third, recondition your nervous system, not through journaling, affirmations, or manifestation bullshit. No, through actual exposure therapy that forces the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, to recalibrate what counts as threat versus just discomfort. And as I said, we did it through a bunch of protocols: cold exposure, hot exposure, exposure therapy. We did it through strategic outreach. But the idea is teach the brain that even if he had been hit by these lawsuits, he was still in control of his brain. And finally, activate the automatic part of the brain called the basal ganglia through volume quotas. So we're not trying to do more outreach. We're literally saying send 30 DMs every single day. We're not saying work on your business. We're saying 2 hours every day revenue generating before you open email or Slack. The goal is to track the inputs, not only the outputs. And the goal is not perfect execution. Some days you get 35, some days you get 25. It's okay. What matters is something called habit automaticity. You do it irrespectively of how you feel about it. And if you do it for long enough, it becomes who you are. Your identity literally wraps around your nervous system. Whatever you repeat, you become. And that's when your intelligence becomes an accelerant instead of a brake, because you literally become better at identifying the highest leverage habits that you're going to be building. You're actually deploying your IQ where it matters, not in trying to avoid mistakes, but rather trying to optimize for the highest leverage. That is what elite founders do. And I remember this very founder told me a couple of weeks ago, he said, dude, I have no idea what my limit is anymore, because he had grown tremendously with this business. And the lawsuits, he won the fucking lawsuits. He was always going to win them because they made no sense, but they still paralyzed him for many months. When your intelligence stops predicting failure and start analyzing feedback, guess what happens? You get exponentially better much faster. So if you're currently stuck, that's probably because you're not executing enough and you're not learning fast enough. And the solution is not to try to think yourself out of it, it's to rewire your brain to change what it classifies as a threat. And for that, you need external accountability and you need a system. So get that system or book your call below, because we can help you with this. See you in the next video.